The end of emulation is upon us. Not only does the Nintendo Switch 2 emulator not exist, not only has Nintendo shut down a ton of high-profile Nintendo emulators, not only are dudes being sent to prison and being forced to spend the rest of their lives paying Nintendo for the damages that they caused them, Nintendo is now in a position where they can shut down emulators of their previous generation Nintendo console, because everybody thought Hydra 3 was true. Everyone thought that Nintendo would not be able to shut down every emulator that exists for Nintendo Switch. Everyone thought that Nintendo would only go after the big boys and leave the most popular emulators alone. They really did not see this coming. People really thought that they'd be endlessly be able to pirate Nintendo games on PC, that they would be able to download games off the internet and play it for free on their $5,000 gaming rig. Paid for by their aging mommies. Okay, this is the end of that narrative. This is the end of that cope. Is that we have seen that Nintendo has shut down emulation so completely that there is no reason to buy it anymore. Because all the games that you could emulate are easily obtainable on Nintendo consoles at a reasonable price, will continue to remain available at that reasonable price. All the while, emulation gets harder and harder to do, harder and harder to crack, and becomes prosecuted more and more. We're already at the point where it feels as if publishers have already found a nice little workaround to the whole I own the game physically so I can play it on my PC thing. They're just going to make all the games digital. So, when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, you're not going to be able to crack it. You're not going to be able to pirate it. You're not going to be able to tell people that, I actually just bought the game physically and then ripped it onto my PC. Nobody's going to do that. That's not going to be a thing 20 years from now. There aren't even going to be any discs. So, essentially, gaming companies have found workarounds to shutting down all these emulators, and they are establishing themselves as the dominant force in gaming. Okay, it's not just Nintendo. You're seeing Xbox and PlayStation cracked out on this too. The pirate thing is over. Okay, that's what we're seeing here. That's what we're experiencing. That's what we're dealing with. Is that Nintendo has demolished the gaming industry. In that there is not going to be there isn't going to be a PC release of a Nintendo game. There isn't going to be a method of pirating them. There isn't going to be mods in the future because of how complex games are now. You don't even really see mods for games more recent than the GameCube era. Okay, and even then for only the super mainstream popular titles, right? We're in the end age, the end days, the apocalyptic scenario for the golden age of piracy. It's been on the way out for a long time, but it's interesting how the community still refuses to admit it's here. That Nintendo won the console war, that they beat the PC gamers, that they beat the pirates, that they beat the emulators, and that there's no getting around the fact that if you're gonna play a Nintendo game, you're gonna have to own a Nintendo console. There's just no getting around that simple fact. And no matter how hard people try and tell you that I'll just wait for a port of the Duskbloods on a real gaming console, I'll just wait for the PC version, or I'll just pirate it. We are in a position now where we can safely say that's never going to happen. The Duskbloods, by its nature, being a PvP game, you're going to want to have the biggest possible player base. There is never going to be a scenario in which you can pirate the Duskbloods, go on your own, not from slop server, and, get a better game than you could get on the Nintendo Switch 2. That's just the reality of it. On top of having to pirate the game, you also have to crack into the servers and somehow avoid getting detected by from slops server maintenance guys, right? It's not enough to simply steal a video game anymore. Okay, we've been hearing situations for stories for decades about how Nintendo has been cracking down on people who pirate Pokemon, right, and try to like trade them online and stuff like that. Like they've been able to spot that for a long time, right? And now they're taking that next step forward. And we're even seeing situations in which companies that have been like traditionally very pro-piracy, Polygon and Kotaku, they came out and tried to encourage people to like pirate Metroid Dread on PC for the better experience. Nintendo just blacklisted those motherfuckers, and they're still seething about it, to the point where like they're straight up making clickbait articles about how like, oh yeah, millions of people will not be able to play the new Zelda game because they don't own Switch 2s. It's like they're coping so hard about getting blacklisted by like the market leader in video games that they have to like resort to these cheap tactics. And this is like the end result of like this 25-year campaign to like destroy Nintendo and make them go third party, is that every company had like threw its weight behind PlayStation. Every single one of them tried to tell you that you could pirate Nintendo games, you didn't have to support Nintendo hardware, that it would be better for everyone if Nintendo just released their games on like the better hardware from people who actually knew what they were doing. Like that was the narrative. That was the cope. And now we're at the point where the cope has completely fallen apart. It doesn't even make any sense anymore. There is no logistical way that you could properly emulate something like Nintendo Switch Sports Resort. And the traditional cope has always been that like, well, I don't want to play Nintendo Switch Sports Resort or Dragon Drive or ARMS or any of these other games that utilize Nintendo's gimmicks. But like, those games do matter, and they are selling pieces of hardware. And as a result of that, as long as games like this exist, that is a blow against emulation and the pirate community, right? If you can't properly emulate every single Nintendo Switch 2 game that exists, then by definition, the Nintendo Switch 2 is a console worth owning. And this is something that a lot of these people cannot wrap their minds around. Like, this is something that these people are very deeply struggling with, is that they can't accept the fact that they lost. They can't accept the fact that, like, Shift Up has hired a DEI activist, like, in management. They can't accept the fact that all their guys, Blizzard, they can't accept, COD has fallen off, Titanfall doesn't exist anymore. Destiny doesn't exist anymore. They can't like cope with like, I've seen people lamenting the downfall of Horizon Zero Dawn, an IP that literally nobody cares about, okay? Like, I have seen so many people bitch and moan and cry about all these obscure video game franchises while completely neglecting to acknowledge the reality that Nintendo has outlasted all of them and is still putting out great games all the time in all their different series. And we are witnessing the end of this anti-Nintendo cope. Like, I don't think it's going to survive this generation, because people really thought that the Switch 2 was going to struggle after the success of the Switch 1. People really thought this thing had no games and that nobody would want to buy it and that it would completely fall apart. And all of that was nothing more than a complete cope. Like, it really needs to be said, it really needs to be studied just how desperate the community was to push their agenda, to push their nonsense onto people. And what's even more interesting is just how they will not admit that it's over, okay? Nintendo just shut down an entire GitHub server of like 200 emulators for Switch 1, right? Like, and they're gonna keep doing it again because it's completely in their legal right to do this, in spite of how much the masses cope and see, right? This is something that really, truly, absolutely needs to be understood, is that the emulation era is coming to an end.